Larry's Food. I remember when I used to work at a venue center. It was called the Evening Side Inn and is located out in the countryside of Vanderbilt County, Maryland. The place is nice. It was built along the edge of a massive hilly cornfield that sat along the edge of some nice woods on one side of it. The place hosted all sorts of things such as weddings, banquets, and parties. It was really appealing appearance-wise, both inside and out. The exterior is filled with bountiful gardens and spaces, and various patios and whatnot. And the foundation is made from stone bricks, the rest of the building being wooden with a slanted roof. It consisted of 3 floors. The first floor, or the bottom floor, having mostly employee work areas such as dishwashing kitchens, storage closets, bathrooms, or a break room, as was the main storage room. The venue and party room were convened into a dance floor, along with the bride's and the groom's room for the weddings. The second floor was what we consider the main floor. It had the main dining room with massive windows that overlooked the beautiful countryside, along with the main office too. The main kitchen is up there, which is where the food is cooked and prepared. And yes, I must mention that there were 2 kitchens, one for cooking and one for dishwashing. And then the third floor is where the owners lived. They were an old couple in their 70s. The place was built way back in the day when they were younger, and they still kept it running to this very day. I know that they always like to pop their heads in during events to check in on employees and such. But anyway, for some background, I worked as a busboy/valet. That job involved the following tasks across various events. Those would be standing outside to greet and direct guests before weddings, cleaning dishes in the downstairs kitchen, sweeping and mopping floors, taking out the trash, etc. The other main job besides the cook were the co-cook or the servers, and they did just that. They served the guests drinks and sometimes food. They were also responsible for cleaning tables and setting them. They also cleaned the bathrooms and took care of doing laundry. Now, those 2 main jobs were the only jobs available for people like us who were working part-time. Then there was the chef, the only full-time job working there. His name was Larry, and no one knows all too much about him. He's an older man in his 50s or something. He's pretty elusive and is rarely seen, but when I do see him, his appearance is all too distinguishable. He appears to be about 5'5" and is quite frail. He's balding up top and wears a thin pair of glasses. He's always seen wearing the exact same pair of clothes involving a white button-up shirt along with a pair of PJ pants with jalapenos and bacon patterns on them. He is super creepy and is always known for driving an old rusty Jeep Cherokee. The only reason we know that is because his car was always parked in the back parking lot, the far back, farthest one from the building. I think he arrived at work at least 3 hours before he needed to. Now, I get that he's the cook and all and that he needs to prepare the food, but arriving 3 hours before seems excessive to me. But I can say for a fact that it should not take that long to cook chicken and pasta, as from what I know, that's what's served 90% of the time. Whenever I arrived at work, I could always hear his trashy rock music blaring from the kitchen. I guess that's what he likes to listen to, though, so I won't judge. There will be more on the food later on, though, but for now, back to the main part of the story. It was an average Friday afternoon in March. The weather was overcast. It had been raining all day long. The time was around 4:45 p.m., and I was currently in the process of getting in the car to drive over to the Evening Side Inn for work. That night's shift would go for about 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. The event was scheduled to be a birthday party for someone turning 60. Quite the expensive party for such an age, as the Evening Side Inn did not charge cheaply for their services. The actual party itself began at 6 and ended at 10, but the employees needed to arrive an hour early to help set up, as well as later to stay and clean up, of course. I pulled into the upper parking lot around 4:50, as I lived extremely close to the place. I was annoyed as I was yet again the first employee to arrive. Well, I take that back actually. I wasn't technically the first employee to arrive. I glanced to my left and saw Larry's old Jeep Cherokee parked right next to me in a rusty trailer that permanently sat in the parking lot for some unknown reason. Something told me that Larry had already been there for some time already. I sat in the car for about 5 minutes until the other busboy working that night, Brody, arrived. It would just be us two working the downstairs kitchen that evening, but we're usually pretty efficient in getting things done, so shouldn't be too difficult. "Hello there, sir," Brody said. "Hey," I replied. "Hey, tonight shouldn't be too hard, it's only 50 people, right?" "Yep," Brody replied, pretty enthusiastically. I saw that he held a Monster Energy in his hand, specifically the Pacific Punch flavor. That meant that he'd be quite energetic that evening. Brody and I strolled down into the main lobby and into the dining room and made our way into the office to clock in. "Alright, I'll bring up the plates if you can clean the foyer," Brody suggested. Brody headed downstairs to do the dishes and prepare the plates. Before going to the foyer, I went to go use the restroom real quick, though I got jump scared when none other than Larry, the chef, rounded the corner from the other side. I quickly moved out of the way and apologized for getting in his way. He didn't respond. He simply glared at me with those beady eyes of his. It was weird how he was coming from the bathroom. I also noticed the fact that he held a mysterious tiny bottle in his hand, and then hastily strolled back into the main kitchen, disappearing from sight. Quite weird and very suspicious indeed. But anyway, I went to the foyer and opened up the cleaning closet. All cleaning the foyer was just involving vacuuming the carpet pretty much and wiping down the windows. Very easy and simple. And so I did just that. After the foyer was all clean, I headed downstairs and was pleased to find that Brody had already set up the kitchen for the night. "Alright, seems like we're good to go then. I don't need to... Yeah, I really can't think of anything else to do for now," I mentioned, and Brody agreed. Brody and I went across the downstairs hallway and into the uniform closet, aka the break room for us busboys. The other break room was simply up in the main office. I watched as Brody took out his mango peach elf bar and took a hit, though just as he did that, Martha, one of the owners, rounded the corner as she had just come downstairs. It's quite creepy how she always just appears out of nowhere. You never hear her coming. Now she's old and doesn't really know what vaping is, so I told her that Brody's elf bar was a portable power bank for his phone. But there was a dilemma on Brody's end, however. He hadn't yet exhaled the cloud of smoke yet, and if he opened up his mouth even a little bit, he'd be busted and certainly fired, as smoking is something that the owners, Michael and Martha, do not tolerate, especially indoors. Brody then began coughing up a storm as he was forced to swallow the tropical-infused steam. I felt his pain, but luckily, he was able to play it off as simply swallowing the wrong way.
"Alright, boys, we have a lot of chairs to be put away to this event, and I'm going to need the entire floor mopped too,"
Martha told us. Man, Martha was always a stickler. It didn't matter what the situation was, she would always find something, a meaningless task to do, no matter how ridiculous it was. Anyway, Martha went back upstairs and Brody and I went into the kitchen to look productive, just in case Martha came back. But in reality, we were just standing around talking. I'm not going to beat around the bush any longer. Dinner is about to be served to the guests in the dining room upstairs. And pretty soon, dishes began coming down so we could wash them. 10 minutes later, it's time for the employees to eat. "I am so hungry right now, Nick," Brody told me. I, on the other hand, was not hungry, as I'd always made sure to eat before coming into work, and for good reason. Brody and I made our way upstairs and grabbed some food from the mini buffet set up and onto our plates. Brody got everything he could. I'm talking the chicken with the Dijon mustard sauce, stuffed pasta shells, and roasted potatoes. Again, I wasn't that hungry, and so I decided not to grab anything at all. The servers would get to eat in the main office, but the busboys, aka Brody and I, for whatever reason, had to eat back downstairs in our break room, probably because of its close proximity to our kitchen. Brody pulled out a tiny little dinky chain light that hung from the ceiling, therefore turning on the exposed light bulb. The wobbly folding table was the first thing we saw upon entering. All the shirts and jackets hanging on the wall had collected a lot of dust as they were hung there. This made the room smell and be quite musty. Anyway, we sat down on the rusty metal folding chairs and ate our food. Usually, I would eat the food, like the chicken, for example, but there's a catch to it. It tastes okay, just okay, but if you feel... it makes you feel like absolute shit after eating it. You feel extremely lethargic and weighed down. You just feel like dirty as well, like in such a weird way, I can't explain it. And that's not even the worst of the effects. It makes you shit a lot. Every time that Brody eats that food, he's in the bathroom for at least a good 30 or so minutes. I don't want to go into too much details, that'd be pretty gross, but let's just say you can usually smell the bathroom fumes all the way from upstairs. The gas that food causes you to release is beyond toxic. Something tells me that either the meat is the biggest culprit of it all, or that it's something pesky in that mustard sauce that Larry slathers all over it. Could be either of those, though, personally. I think it's everything because I remember one time I only ate the bread rolls, only the bread, and still ended up having to spend a few hours in the bathroom. Let's just say that. That is why you should never ever eat Larry's food. Anyway, Brody went to head upstairs where he'd begin moving tables and mopping the floors. I, on the other hand, had stacks upon stacks of plates to wash in the downstairs kitchen, so I went to get started on those. I turned the sink on and poured in some dish soap. I had a pretty decent evening for getting the dishes done fast, but due to how many there were, it still took me quite a long time to do so. It was obvious that many people had gone up for seconds or even thirds, as there were way more than just 50 plates stacked up down there. About an hour of only scraping, scrubbing, and drying plates went by until Brody had finally come back downstairs. He looked absolutely terrible. He told me that him and a few others just finished cleaning upstairs and that we needed to finish cleaning the downstairs party area now. He let off fart after fart next. The entire downstairs kitchen is now a full-on gas chamber. Brody was now slumped on one of the counters. "Oh, Nick, I feel terrible," he groaned. "Do you think that Larry poisons his food?" Bingo. Brody had just said what I'd been thinking this entire time. Does Larry, the chef, poison his food? Hey, one sec. I'll be back 1 second. Pause the story, because this is getting too weird. Like, why, if you're a chef, why would you poison your own food? Like, what gain do you get from that? Are you just fucked up in the head? That's a crazy theory, and we were both thinking that. But there had to be a reason that he arrived at work so early. There had to be. One thing that might cause a suspicion in us is that it might sound downright ridiculous, but I had to agree. It's that obnoxious abundance of gas and lethargy could not have been from anything. It had to have been from something. Because every time we eat Larry's food, this shit happens. Literally. Poor choice of words saying that, but you get what I'm saying. One may think that a suspicion like that was downright ridiculous. I would have to agree it kind of is. The obnoxious abundance of gas and lethargy could have been from anything, right? That's what people would say, but I think not. We were feeling the same way every time after eating this food. But just then, Larry's co-chef, Joey, came downstairs to put away from leftover pasta shells in the fridge. Joey is, kind of like Larry in a way, as he's elusive and kind of creepy. There's even some rumors about him being Larry's son. Brody and I decided to pop the question to him. Joey? But he didn't hear us at first. "Joey!" Brody shouted. "Yeah," he replied, sounding a bit annoyed. "Does Larry poison his food?" "No, why would you even think that? Do you have a problem or something?" Joey responded. He seemed oddly defensive for whatever reason. I don't know why. I get that someone in his situation might get a bit offended since the food is homemade and all, assuming that it isn't actually poisoned, But Joey got a bit more than defensive, though. He'd been coming at us on the offensive. "You guys should probably just focus on your own job more. This kitchen is filthy. You two pigs should mind your own business and know your place. Larry and I, we're chefs, and you two, you're only dishwashers." Joey then went on to cackle up some fake laugh by means of belittling Brody and I. To make matters extra suspicious, almost as if Joey was trying to hide what was really going on inside of Larry's kitchen. "Okay, Brody, how about this? Larry and Joey leave work in about an hour. I say that once the night is over and everyone's clocked out, we stay here after hours and do a little sneak investigation into that kitchen of Larry's," I suggested. "You really want to do that, Nick? You know that Larry's kitchen is strictly off limits to anyone other than Larry and Joey," Brody replied. "And you don't think the fact that it's off limits like that makes it even more suspicious?" "I mean, I guess you have a point," said Brody. "I'm in. although we have to be very careful. And it was set. Brody and I would finish working the night's event as usual, and then when everyone clocked out and went home, we could hide out and then sneak into Larry's kitchen after hours. It was risky, but we had to get to the bottom of what the fuck was up with that food. The time is now around 9 in the evening, and the guests were now out in the downstairs reception party room. They were all scheduled to leave in roughly an hour. Once they all left, Brody and I, all we had to do was mop the floors and set up some chairs for the next event. After that, it would likely be close to 11 at night, and we'd clock out, and pretty soon, we finished cleaning downstairs. And we turned off all the lights, and that was that. But there was a mistake, however, as the kitchen was now pitch black. Brody did not waste any time. He got the fuck out of there and booked it down the hallway into the reception room where all the lights were still on. "Wait for me," I shout. I slowly walk my way out of the kitchen, only navigating by feeling my way around. It was pretty creepy. I almost felt as if some third entity was watching me from the doorway on the other end of the room. The grandson of the owners claimed that the entire place is haunted, and as of that current moment, I was not doubting that. However, the presence I felt was a little too real to simply be played off as a ghost, though. I then heard the sound of teeny tiny footsteps scurrying up the dark wooden stairway. It sounded like they were those of a tiny, scrawny man. I left the kitchen and met Brody in the reception room, which was still all lit up and lively with employees who were in the process of moving chairs, and so I decided to help. The next 30 minutes were pretty uneventful. The guests had left a long time ago, meaning Brody, the event coordinator, one server, and I were the only ones remaining. Or so we thought. Soon enough, we'd cleaned out the rest of the reception room. That meant we could finally go out and clock out, and go home. Psych. Anyway, we could clock out and not go home, because Brody and I, we knew exactly what we were going to do next. We went upstairs with the other two people working that night and headed into the main office. We said goodbye to the others and pretended to clock out. We then went and hid in one of the bathrooms until we heard the other two leave the building and lock the front doors. The evening side-in had no security systems or alarms, so we wouldn't have to worry about getting busted. The entire building was pitch black for the most part, as was the outside. The only light that we could see was the fluorescent red of the exit sign by the front door. The only sounds that we could hear were the ringing in our ears, and every 5 or so minutes, the heating unit from downstairs would come on. The place is always very unsettling at night, to say the least. I was just happy that Brody was doing this with me, as I'd have shat my pants already if I was going at it by myself. Larry's food not even mentioned. "Alright, let's get in this kitchen," I said. We did just that. However, to get to Larry's kitchen, we had to walk by the stairway that led downstairs. Words simply cannot describe just how unsettling the place became after dark. Our cheap flashlights weren't that bright, so we couldn't even see all the way down those stairs upon shining our lights down there. Just a black abyss. We didn't mess around with that stairwell any more than we needed to. We hurried past it and stepped into the all-fabled Larry's kitchen. We obviously couldn't see much in there as it was hard to find the light switch. We were immediately hit with an odor, though, a stench. I'm not really sure what the stench was, but it smelled bad, and quite frankly, quite suspicious. The smell got me thinking back to when I witnessed Larry, the chef, coming back out from the bathroom earlier at the beginning of the shift, earlier in the night. Brody and I walked deeper into the kitchen next. I then figured that I should probably record this on my phone, just in case I needed any evidence in case we found anything alarming. "Oh shit, hold up. I think I forgot my phone in the car," I told Brody. "Do you have yours?" No," Brody replied. "Alright, well, you wait here. I gotta go outside and grab it," I said. "Ain't no way I'm waiting for you by myself in this sketchy kitchen. I'm just lock myself in the office and wait till you get back," he responded. It was set. I left the kitchen, and Brody went to lock himself in the main office. He turned on a small lamp as well, so it wouldn't be as creepy. I didn't blame him. Anyway, I left the building and made the terrifying walk all the way back to the car. Like I said, the employees are always to park up in the farthest parking lot from the building, meaning I was forced to walk through the pitch black night in the middle of nowhere to get to it. Soon, my car came into the dim view of my flashlight. Brody's car came into view as well. But there was a catch. There was another car in that parking lot. It was parked way in a back corner by one random trailer. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who it was. It was an old rusty Jeep Cherokee. You know, the kind that belonged to Larry, the chef. Larry wasn't in that car, meaning chances meant he was still somewhere inside the building with Brody. I grabbed my phone from my car and began jogging my way back across the parking lot to get to the building, as I had to get Brody out of there and fast. If Larry was still in the Evening Side Inn, then he would undoubtedly be aborting the mission. That was a fact. I was just about to walk inside, though, when I looked to my left for some random reason. That's when I saw Larry. He was over by the window of the main office, peering inside. He hadn't yet seen me, though, which is a good thing. I backed up a tad bit, and was able to see into the main office as well, as the blinds had been left open. Brody had the light on in there, so I was able to see him sitting in a rolly chair whilst looking at some random papers. He hadn't yet noticed the peeping Tom peering in at him. Larry continued looking in at Brody. He was very short, so he had to stand on his tippy toes to see in. Even then, only his eyes were able to peek over the bottom of the windowsill. He seemed to be struggling to see higher, but to no avail. I didn't waste any more time. I walked back inside the building and signaled for Brody to come into the main office, or I should say to let me into the main office. I was so sneaky and careful, however. I did not want to let Larry know about it, that a second person is in there with Brody as well. So we switched off the lamp in the office, and then Brody met me in the main dining room area. Before anything else, however, I popped my head into the now pitch-dark office. I was able to see a silhouette of Larry's bony head still peering in through the window. The faint moonlight made his outline even more prominent. He was still, or more still than a statue. I could only hear the faint hush of the wind outside. Very, very eerie. I then became extremely disturbed for whatever reason. Larry wasn't moving. It was almost like he knew I was there, even though he shouldn't have been able to see inside anymore. I got out of there and fast. Brody, we need to leave, I said. But I didn't see Brody anymore. He was no longer in the main area with me. Nick, he whispered. I looked to my right and saw Brody peeking his head from around the corner of the doorframe. He was back in Larry's kitchen. I walked back into said kitchen and met Brody in the back, near where Larry kept all of his drawers of ingredients. It's kind of weird how he kept his food, ingredients, and spices in drawers, and not just in regular cabinets, like a regular chef would. But Larry was no regular chef. Yo, you won't believe what I found back here, Brody told me. Brody then took something out of one of the drawers and showed me. It was at that moment everything about Larry's food made complete sense. Laxatives, I quietly exclaimed. It was laxatives. I had no idea why Larry was putting laxatives in his food, but something told me that he likely had a sort of hidden agenda of sorts, and that those laxatives were likely an essential part of his plan. Though, what agenda could he possibly have? Like, what was he trying to do? Like I said, I had no idea how such a diabolical substance could every part of anything or any agenda semi-useful. Like, someone told me that if Larry did have a plan, it was likely something a little more sinister, if you know what I mean. Give me that, I said as I snatched the bottle of laxatives from Brody's hand. I then chucked it into a nearby trash can. Good call, Nick, Brody stated. As of that moment, Brody and I were feeling lively. We were looking forward to the prospect of actually having good food at work that didn't make you shit your brains out. That bubbly joy, though, did not last long, as we then heard the front doors of the building swing open from out in the main area. No one said a word as of that moment, but we already knew that it was Larry, the chef. It was then that the reality of Brody and I's situation hit us like a brick. It was after midnight. We were stuck inside the dark, inside a building located in the middle of nowhere with some deranged chef now onto us. Next, we panicked. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, Brody and I decided to split up on our paths of escape / hiding from Larry. Little did I know, though, that Brody ended up choosing the escape path, and I ended up choosing the hiding path. Brody ran back into the main office and down towards the groom's room, which had an exit. I, on the other hand, was only thinking in the state of panic. and then ended up racing downstairs into the maze-like basement of the Evening Side Inn. There were a few exits in the basement of the place, but they were all located far away in a storage room and the reception room. But making it to those exits would mean me having to navigate my way through the vast array and hallways down there with only my subpar phone flashlight to guide me through. As of the current moment, I was standing at the bottom of the staircase at a sort of intersection, if that's what you want to call it. I had the stairs behind me, and in front of me was the door to a large dark room that was used for the owner's grandson's homeschooling. To my left was the downstairs kitchen, and to my right was the uniform closet or our break room. I decided to go inside there. Larry was now on his way downstairs, and so I needed to hide. I went farther back into the closet before going into another room, which is like the boiler room for the place. And in there was the electric box and hot water heater. I now had my flashlight off, so I couldn't be seen. The faint red glow of the exit light backed by the stairs illuminated out in the hallway to the dimmest extent. Don't get me wrong, it was still dark to a whole other level, but I could still faintly make out the features when Larry the chef rounded the corner and stepped into the closet. I ducked my body behind the wall of a boiler room and peeked my head out to see. Larry couldn't see me, and I was sure glad that he couldn't. He looked absolutely deranged and psychotic. He still wore the same outfit from work involving the white button-up shirt and the jalapeno bacon pants. The dim red light from the exit sign made his eyes appear to be jet black. Foam was now oozing from his mouth, and his teeth seemed to have been filled with something, but also filed to be razor sharp, like fangs. This was made evident by his animal-like teeth that were revealed by his creepy smile, which extended way wider than any regular smile ever should. He stood like this for around 10 minutes before turning around and heading into the downstairs kitchen. At first I was relieved, though that relief did not last long though, when I heard the sound of a knife being drawn from the shelf rack and the sleek sound of metal on metal piercing through the silent rooms. I panicked again and made yet another stupid move. Instead of booking it back upstairs and outside, which is something I probably had more than enough time to do, I pried open a small hatch in the drywall that led to the inside of the walls of the building. I had no idea what on earth I was thinking. I didn't think that Larry would follow me into the walls of all places, so I figured that in there is my safe spot to turn my flashlight back on so I could actually see. The inside of the walls were claustrophobic to a whole new level. They went up quite high, like 15 feet, but were barely just a mere 2 feet in width. This meant that I needed to kind of shimmy my way to make any distance in there. I had to turn on my side and shuffle my way through. It was disgusting in there as well. The bricks were moldy and had like mildew on them. The building's pipes were in there, meaning that I could constantly hear the drip drops of what I hoped was not toilet water falling on my head. The spiders in there were insane too. I'm not too sure what kind they were, but they were big, brown, and had like 5-inch leg spans. And it wasn't just creepy spiders in there too, no. Everything from cockroaches, mouse traps with dead rats in them, to even a raccoon. "Oh, don't, get away," I said as I shooed the raccoon away, possibly avoiding rabies. But what I was also running from, Larry, may have also had rabies. I continued pressing on then. Something told me that this interior wall went all the way around the building's perimeter. 5 minutes later, and I was still making my way down the narrow crawl space-like corridors, and I was now regretting my decision of ever going back into the walls at that point, and I was about to turn around and run back the way I came from. I didn't though, because when I heard the sound hatch of the way I came in being busted open, through the drywall, that was when I knew I may as well have been cooked. I looked back behind me and could see the faint red light from the exit sign cast into the wall, followed by the scrawny silhouette of Larry, the chef, step inside. I noticed that he was no longer holding the knife now, rather a syringe with a needle on it. He waved it back and forth in a slow, taunting motion. Very creepy. It was weird how he hadn't uttered a single word the entire night, and that was true. He really had not said a word. He was just silent. Man, enough of that though. I picked up my pace through the walls and soon rounded a corner. I was hoping that if I kept on this wall tunnel that, whatever you want to call it, that I'd simply find another little hatch that would empty me out into another room, away from Larry, a room that'd be closer to an exit as well. As of the current moment, though, things were looking grim. The wall tunnel seemed like it had no end in sight. The walls kept becoming narrower and narrower. Uh-oh, I thought to myself. There was some quite unfortunate news. I hit a dead end. There was nothing I could do. I held on against the filthy wall behind me and shined my now dying flashlight back onto the way in which I came from. It was only a matter of time before Larry the chef rounded the corner, syringe still in hand. It made complete sense how he was able to completely cover ground inside the wall so quickly, as he was twice as skinny as I was. He had his hands in a sort of creepy, gimme-gimme like motion, as if he was on the prowl or something. It's kind of like that one scene from, the Goosebumps series episode, where there's this one episode of this girl who's running through the library, where the main character was eating bugs turned into a monster. That's kind of what Larry looked like. He now had his tongue out and was flailing it around wildly. His skin had turned a weird, slimy, greenish pink. His beady black eyes seemed to be almost protruding out of his eye sockets. He held the needle syringe up to his face and squirted a bit of the mysterious liquid out by means of creating suspense. I was unable to connect some dots and figure out just exactly what the mysterious liquid was. It was the laxatives. It was almost like Larry could read my mind or something, because as soon as I realized that he had the laxatives, it was like his deranged smile grew even wider. Larry snickered. I really felt like I was in a horror movie, though the cheesy kind where the villain stalls so much that the main character escapes and saves himself. Well, that's precisely what happened next. About 3 or so minutes of snickering to himself went by, waving around the syringe like a maniac. He finally came to try and proceed to inject me with the poopy drug of his. I said, "Man, fuck this shit," to myself and stood the fuck up. I was fed up at that point. Fed up with Larry, fed up with his stupid laxatives, and just plain fed up with this entire night in general. I lifted my foot and kicked Larry in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. As a result, he fell over on his back, but there was a catch. When Larry landed on the wet ground, he landed right on top of the syringe, which went on to inject him right in the hiney. This was a serious situation now. I now knew that I had to get out of there right then and there when I heard what I presumed to be the first of many, gas leaks slip out of him. I scooched past him and burst my way out of the hatch leading back into the closet. I then used my flashlight to help me sprint up the stairs and back into the main dining area, where I proceeded to bust out of the doors and into the outside night. The cool air that night felt like the biggest relief after being stuck inside those dungeon-like walls with Larry. I can now hear the sounds of Larry the chef shitting his jalapeno bacon pants growing louder and louder, more prominent as well. I was sure glad that I got out of there when I did. Once I made it to the parking lot, I found Brody, along with the police outside waiting. "He's down on the walls," I told the sheriff. The police didn't waste any time. They stormed inside the Evening Side Inn and went to search for Larry, the chef. I was confused, though, when they came out not 2 minutes later, defeated. They weren't really taking defeat, though, for an answer. Rather, they were delegating roles. That's what I'm saying. Rather, they began chatting up over the phone some sort of solution. Soon, a white van pulled up. Apparently, the fumes from Larry's laxatives mess was so bad, one of the cops began having hallucinations, and therefore, they were forced to call the biohazard technicians, who wore hazmat suits, to arrive on scene, as Larry was now being escorted out, and was shitting his pants to a preposterous amount. We could even hear the farts echoing from the building all the way outside. 5 minutes later, the technicians reemerged from the building with Larry having been seized. Larry looked just as unhinged as he did back inside the walls. He was now snarling at the technicians and trying to bite them, but luckily, they had him restrained quite nicely. He had to be wrapped in one of those heavy-duty tinfoil blankets so he wouldn't make a mess all over the van that he was being dragged into. Anyway, the technicians locked up the van and sped off into the night. It's kind of weird how Larry wasn't even handed over to the police. Rather, only the technicians. Someone told me that he was being taken back to a sort of lab to be studied or whatnot. The police then said goodbye to Brody and I, and they too sped away. At that point, Brody and I were just fed up and traumatized from what Larry the chef had done. We simply went on home and called it a night. I decided to. I decided to keep my. Okay, I'm gonna keep it about. I quit after that because even though Larry was gone and we have a new chef making normal food, I really just couldn't stomach that place anymore with all the with what happened that night. I just didn't think that job was gonna work out. Just it's just still a mystery of how or why that guy was putting laxatives in his food in the first place. Like, some people out there are just messed up in the head, and hopefully Larry gets the treatment he deserves and the help he gets. That then concludes Larry's Food.